Hello, and welcome to the Redundancy Matters podcast, helping compassionate HR professionals managing redundancies who want to put people at the heart of the process. I'm your host, June Hogan, a qualified career coach and outplacement specialist with a background in HR and founder of outplacement services provider Wildwood Coaching. In this podcast, I'll be sharing my insights and experience from being on both sides of the redundancy table and from my years of experience supporting individuals after redundancy through outplacement support. Welcome to this episode of the Redundancy Matters podcast. I'm June Hogan, a career coach and outplacement specialist, and today I'm going to be talking about how to manage a redundancy process with compassion. Putting compassion at the heart of a redundancy process can make a huge difference to how the message is received and how individuals feel about the process and also feel about themselves as a result of their redundancy. So I'm going to take you through 4 areas that I believe can really make a difference when you're managing redundancies and want to make sure that you put people at the heart of the process. The first one is transparency. And this really does start with the announcement. You can check out my website, and at the bottom in the resources section, you'll find a blog which I've written about how to prepare and deliver a redundancy announcement. And in there, I refer to the announcement that the Airbnb CEO made to all their employees back in 2020. This letter was an open letter to all employees explaining the financial situation, the rationale for the decisions, and the CEO really connected with people on a human level when he made that announcement. So I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to read the letter in full. And as I say, there is a blog on my website with some more details in. But this was an example of transparency at a difficult time, and the transparency around the decision and how much the CEO respected and valued people. And it really came from the heart. So putting transparency first when you're thinking about planning redundancies and then indeed managing them is really important for people at risk, because they want to really understand the rationale behind why potentially they could be losing their role. And the second thing is empathy. I'm going to do a longer episode on empathy later in the series. But empathy is about connecting with people on an individual level, really letting them know that they matter and giving them the space and the time to be heard and also to process the news. So that might be in the collective consultation meetings, if that's relevant, or in the individual consultation meetings that you'll be holding, or just indeed after the announcement goes out, giving people that opportunity to connect, to ask questions, and to really have that opportunity to have some time with either yourselves as the HR team, if that's possible, but most importantly with their line managers. And empathy can feel like quite a hard thing to do, because essentially you are sitting with someone's emotions. You are trying to understand their feelings and ultimately to let them know that they're not alone. Lots of people find empathy quite hard because naturally they want to jump into fixing things. They want to help. They want to make things better. But when people are in a redundancy situation, what I've learnt from my own experience, both personally and professionally, is that people don't want you to start solutionizing. They are keen for you to give them that time, to give them that space, to let them be heard, to let them know that they've got someone that they can go and talk to and share their feelings, rather than thinking, oh, well, I should just pull myself together and kind of get on with it. And when people are saying things like, well, it could be worse, or at least, those sorts of things doesn't really help, although people do want to try and make things better. So taking an empathetic approach means thinking about how you build that into the planning process, building it into the timing plan. So thinking, okay, when are you announcing? How are you going to announce them? Making sure everyone gets to hear as much as possible at the same time. Where will that be? Who will make the announcement? So those are really small details that really set more of an empathetic tone to the whole process, if you can really dig into those and get those right. And then thinking about planning the individual meetings, so preparing line managers to lead with empathy. And as I said, I'll do a deeper dive onto that in another episode. The other thing is thinking about the support that you will offer. So the support for those people who are at risk. Are you going to offer outplacement, for example? This is something which lets the people know who are at risk, lets them know that they matter. It helps those people who are remaining to see that you've done the right thing for their colleagues and their friends. And again, it's a place for people to go so they can be heard, so they can know they're not alone, and they can have access to the tools and techniques and the resources that they need to help start planning for the future. There's also support in the shape of an employee assistance programme, if that's something that you offer, or your mental health first aiders, making sure people know who they are. And then there's free support that's available from places like the Citizen Advice Bureau, the Department for Work and Pensions, and mental health charities such as Mind. And aside from that support, making sure that you offer your support and encourage line managers to do the same, to keep an open door communication policy and to have regular check-ins with people. That's particularly important for people who are working from home, because you don't have those corridor conversations or those opportunities to catch up when you might be making a coffee in the canteen, etc. So making sure that there are regular check-in points outside of the official consultation meetings. And then finally, dignity. Remembering that there's a person at the heart of this process. Thinking about them and their feelings and always keeping them in your mind. How will they be impacted by the decisions that are about to be made? Because these decisions will impact individuals' lives, their careers, potentially their family. And if you keep all of this front and centre and let it guide you, it can, from the very start and throughout the process, help to provide a dignified approach to redundancy. Because redundancy is more than just losing a job. It's about our jobs are connected to our identity, our purpose, our sense of worth, our self-esteem. And so when you're delivering the news, thinking about delivering that news with kindness, delivering that news with respect, and ensuring that the message is clear and transparent so people can understand, even though many people will be in shock having heard the news, but as much as possible, you can make it clear so that they can understand what potentially is going to happen. And I really like to think of the HR team, or maybe you're in a standalone role, as the voice of humanity in managing a redundancy process, and thinking that those people who are potentially going to be impacted by these announcements, that they're relying on you to lead and advocate for them, to help the leadership team to remember the people at the heart of the process. And so from the very first time that redundancies are potentially on the table and during the planning stages, right the way through to when you're helping to manage those final weeks and days for people within the business, thinking about how they're going to be leaving, etc. Making sure that you are the person who's advocating for them and remembering that they are always at the heart of the process. Because in the words of Maya Angelou, and I've mentioned this at the end of every episode because I think it is so important and so relatable to the process of managing redundancies, is that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So I hope this episode has been helpful to give you some ideas and some thoughts for how you can lead a redundancy process with compassion, with dignity, offering that support and making sure that you and your leaders are leading with empathy and making sure that transparency runs throughout the whole of the process as well. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll tune in again soon to the next episode of Redundancy Matters. Thank you so much for listening to the Redundancy Matters podcast. I hope you found today's episode helpful. It would mean a lot to me if you would follow, rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts, as this helps it reach more people who are managing redundancies. Let me know what you thought, and if you have ideas for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. You can find me on LinkedIn, June Hogan, and get in touch via my website, wildwoodcoaching.co.uk, where you'll also find more resources to help you manage redundancies. I hope you'll join me again soon for the next episode of Redundancy Matters.